Alright, this is the Roman Screencast to start out with. And remember, when we talk about Rome, we're talking about mostly the area, depends on what stage of the Roman Empire we're talking about. Remember, it's been around 1,000 years. Also remember, whatever I say is you can find an exception for. I'm just talking about background pressures for a lot of things in the Roman Empire. You can always, we're dealing with such a stretch-up period that you can always find an exception for any of this stuff. All right, so one of the ways that it's useful to think about, as I was talking about here, this is similar to the map you had in your map. Not a nation state as we think of. This is at the height of its power. When they're all the way to England, right? As we're going to see later, it's actually Rome that started in the modern sense of what we call London with the wall. Really important to go out there and build a wall. They thought this was the end of the earth, which was specifically why they went out there. They wanted to say they conquered to the end of the earth. They built Hadrian's Wall much later down here. And we'll get to all that. So usually it's not really this large for most of it, but at its height, right? And when I was talking about the provinces, we didn't get too much into last night. We will next chapter. It'll be really important for the religion chapter. All these Thracia, Dacia, Armenia, Mesopotamia, all these little things had rulers, right? So as we're going to see, this is for the Jewish people, did not like the Roman rule. Most of the empires, it's not like anybody was happy being ruled by someone else, but more or less Rome had the efficient system of administrators, the bureaucrats we were talking about, that made life bearable for some. All right, and a lot of people kind of enjoyed it. The benefits of this vast network of Roman roads are very good at building Roman roads. I forgot to go over that last night. And the roads included things such as seaways, right? So if someone's writing letters, for instance, back over here, you don't necessarily have to take the road all the way around. You can take a sea channel over here, hop a boat, get up into here, go around, and so on. Right? Very established channels. Peaceful, more or less, relative to the alternative anyway. And really what they want is their cut, right? They want their cut, they want their name all through here, but they are spreading Roman culture. So remember how we talked about Hellenization, the spreading of Greek ideas? Remember, the Romans adopt largely the Greek ideas, but they're doing it with kind of not really a heavier hand so much as a more efficient and sustainable hand that at times will be a heavy hand, I guess. And they need someone to run these provinces, right? Keep people in check, people from revolting, basically. Do the kickback, but in return, right, you get in the Roman roads. These countries they're not countries yet, these provinces. Roman roads, they're getting the water supply, they're getting protection, more basically than anything else. They're all the trading that opens up, right, with the merchants through here. So they're getting a whole theaters, big pain in the butt for some people. They do not like the theaters coming in. Other people, they kind of do like all that sort of stuff. The Roman baths. So when Rome comes in, the cities, provinces, will become more multicultural, and they'll start changing. Right? The old ways will start falling away, getting with this new thing, and that is very organized, right? Much more so organized than what existed before, and is sustainable. Right? Okay, well, one of the ways it's useful to think about it, this is your response, contrast the Greeks and the Romans. So we'll cover it superficially here. You can go into it a little bit more detail in your response as you have time to think about it. So, what do the Greeks tend to like? Temples to glorify gods. Rome, civic buildings. Our civic buildings today, as we talked about, we copy the Romans, just like virtually everyone does. Walls, stone-cut blocks. Rome's concrete. Remember, we talked a big deal that they invented concrete last time. Rectangles and straight lines, or it appears to be with the Greeks. I think we were talking about With the Parthenon, there's actually not a straight line in the place, but it looks like it is. And the Greeks very much were aware of how to manipulate structures to make them appear straight. Because if you actually have a straight line, for instance, a row of stones, well, as it gets larger and larger to the naked eye, it doesn't look straight. So they wanted it to look straight. All right. Rome, like the circles. Think of the arch, remember, turning around on its axis. Curved lines. Support system, post and lintel. And as we discussed last night, the arch is way superior. So both in an actual building, creating the interior space that is not all jammed up by these posts all over the place to support the beams on top. It's a real mess getting around an old Egyptian, Greek place, Sumerian, that sort of thing. The Romans found a way out of that, right? And this basic structure sticks around forever. It's still, of course, with us. Doric and Ionic, right? It's just the cities or the areas that they come from. The Romans preferred the Corinthian kind of area, which is a Greek city, right? So but that's their preferred column. It's just how they look on top and a little bit with the loads on them. Sculpture, Greeks, all gods and goddesses. Love that sort of thing. Romans don't. Actual people, and usually these people, remember, we're pointing. We're going to here. We're taking care of something. There's very gull in it, even in their art. Painting, or what we call art now, is also political propaganda for them. Painting, stylized figures floating in space. Romans like real stuff. So this move back to the real that we're going to get away from again in the Middle Ages, we're not there right now. So the Romans are closer to us in what they like. Subject of art, mythology. Greeks, stories upon stories upon stories. The Romans, it's how do we get, what are our values? Obedience, their version of the state. Right, military triumphs. So that's what they sought to glorify. Well, what does that look like? Sparse, right? Very simple. All this bricks up or stones upon stones piled up. Greeks like this sort of look. Romans, you say, well, it's not all that different, but it kind of is, right? We don't have the same steps going up. This is a larger structure. The columns kind of start to have a little bit more finesse to them, and now you have an actual more utilitarian roof on top. This is, if you're not familiar with the term, this is a pitch in a roof. This is kind of a low pitch, but it's enough to get the rain off of it. So if you go out and look at your house later, if your house had something like that, that's a high pitch. Kind of difficult to put shingles or slate or whatever it is on the roof, but it gets the rain out of there quick with a high pitch. Not much standing water, for instance. So a little bit more utilitarian, practical aspect for it. This one's going to leak a lot more quickly. Religious temple, remember, to Athena, and this should be in a lot better shape, but the Turks much later on, sort of bunch of munitions here, blew it up. Pantheon, Rome. Notice that if it didn't actually say Rome here, it starts to look already like a lot of our buildings in D.C. A lot of the municipal buildings in just about any city, if they have any kind of a decent budget, will these sorts of columns, this look, the triangles here. To us, if we would just say it looks like a stately building. Well, this idea of it looking like a stately building, Rome. Notice that this is an obelisk in front. I didn't talk a whole lot about these. We're on the Egyptian section, but when they ran out of stone, basically, the idea, if you think of this as a skinny pyramid, becomes a kind of a feed into itself. The Romans, just like everybody in the ancient world, Egypt dominated for so long. This is one of the things that's left, right? Even in the middle of Vatican City, going to St. Peter's Basilica, obelisk, right in the middle. Why? That's what kind of people did to show it was important. And if you're so inclined to the secret orders and all that, there's a lot of, I don't know, what I call them conspiracy theories. I think it was just the thing to do, to show off your importance, show you could build these structures. And it seems as a trivial thing, but if you think back in the day, Pericles, the guy that got this going, He is also advertising to any travelers coming in, look what we can do, right? You come against us and we're going to squash you like a bug. Part of it's implied, if you're organized enough to have the marble quarries, the workers, the skilled trades, all that sort of thing, the tax structure set up to do this, the moneyed resources, then the military, it just goes without saying that the military, you only do this sort of stuff afterwards, right? Greek, this is pretty typical. Greek guy, there would be a spear here back in the day. I'm hanging out, or a shepherd's staff, as it were, hanging out, relaxing, watching over the sheep, right, or something like that. It's no big deal. It's all relaxed. Romans, here we're going here. Going here, don't have time to mess around, going this way, going to take care of some kind of problem or otherwise change something, right? Greek. This is from a section in the Iliad where, no, wait a minute, no, that's a different thing for this one here. No, that is the one from the Iliad where the guy rats out. He's about to tell the people what's going on, and a snake comes in and gets them. It's just a different version of it, I think. I may be wrong on this one. This one, the spoils from the Temple of Solomon, Jerusalem. When the Romans sacked the temple later on, this is the actual temple, right? That's still never been fully rebuilt in Jerusalem. This is the Romans took the Jewish Minerva back. This very sacred 7 candelabra thing, and they wanted to build a frieze. They carved it in stone, and then when people would visit them, the important people from these other provinces or provinces they were about to conquer, it's now a visual reminder, right? The Jewish people tried to revolt against us. Well, look what happened to them, right? Look what happened to them. I didn't talk a whole lot about the Etruscans. A lot of the values that the Romans came from the Etruscans. They're a different tribe of people, but they kind of got incorporated, and this is debated in the scholarly community, the classical community. Women are in a lot better shape. Both in Etruscan and the Romans sort of took that on in the Roman Republic. So better off in a sense than Greek women in terms of the Greeks like for their women to stay at home, right? Don't go out without supervision, all that sort of stuff. Roman women could come in too if their husbands died, if there are no male heirs in the household to take over, could get a lot of legal rights, will power, money, that sort of thing. All right. Marriages, people always think, well, it's just the fathers matched their daughters with whomever back in the day. Roman wives had a lot more say than Greek wives, for instance, and how all that was going to happen, right? Father still had say, don't get me wrong, but a lot more influence with women, taken a lot more seriously in that aspect. And this is just the Astrodome, right? The early version of the Astrodome I was talking about. And of course, this isn't the actual Astrodome, but the principle behind it. You can see here the beginnings of maybe something like a part of a cathedral, church-like buildings. The actual cathedral would be more like the worship part of it. This barrel vault extended and really raised up. They're going to take this to the heights in the Middle Ages, as we're going to see. I don't know that we need to talk about this. Is the same ideas as before. The rounded version of this, the same type of thing we're looking at. The toga for peace, by the way, as opposed to military gear. And this is with the same idea with this next one. You see how they sort of one old guy and a couple middle-aged guys, I guess, the important people, to somebody like this. The Romans just love the idea of somebody like this. And this, of course, you ladies, this, of course, I can't imagine that this is somebody you would want to date, but this is what they call the typical old patriarch, right? Some old powerful guy, right? Ugly, right? Is not a pretty man, right? That sort of thing, bald, all that sort of stuff. Oh, well, maybe if you use different words, right? Instead of saying old, you say distinguished, right? Or wise or something like that. Pericles, back in that is a more youthful version of Pericles. He probably portrayed himself, a couple of decades younger than he actually was at the time. But he didn't have the full-on beard here, but you see the sort of the difference, even the look in the face, right? A lot less stress with this one, although he dealt with some pretty heavy stuff, right? He's always serious, this guy, right? You can't imagine a situation coming up where he's not going to sit there, sort of ponder it, put his finger on his chin or whatever. Same thing, we're going here. And I think we can skip through some of this other stuff. We talked about the theater formation last night. I didn't include some of the stuff from the Circus Maximus, which we're going to revisit next week. This idea of, I didn't mention a lot of the chariot races. Their version of NASCAR, right? It was a big thing for the Roman people. That's not this image, by the way. To go to the chariot races and follow their favorite charioteer teams and all that sort of stuff. Okay, now to a little bit of the Pompeii and Vesuvius. This is important because this is where we get Pompeii, and there's this city across the bay that got the same type of treatment. It was a Herculaneum is what it was called. We have a pretty good idea of the summer houses for rich people and for the aristocrats, right, and how they would decorate them. Right. So remember, no air conditioning, no running water. How do you deal with this? Not a bad idea for a floor plan, and some of you may have seen some of the older houses, not a whole lot of them left in Texas, were designed with the same principle. They don't look the same, the houses in Texas, but the principle is the same. So notice the shingles here, probably this clay tile, it's going in. Same thing here. The water from here is dropping off, and this is a descent. Right, this is not an ascent here. It's not to kick the water away from the middle. It's to go toward the middle, and yet the house is lifted up here, and you can see it would fall into a bathing and or water collection area. Right, and this is probably for separate purpose. That was probably the bathing. That was probably the water collection. Painted a little bit. Right, so. Not bad, and they're designed with the main breeze in mind. So if they know in this place they're going to get a southeasterly wind or whatever it was, it's designed for the wind to kind of flow through there and cool things off, right? For these, in the place I'm talking about anyway, largely summer houses. No TV to watch, a lot of entertainment, big on food, right? Could have done a whole screencast just on these elaborate Roman feasts. Some of it's just so over the top, it's hard to believe. But here, the garden, people could eat around here. They would lay down when they were eating, by the way, not sit up on tables, and paint the walls with murals. And we'll talk about the actual construction of a mural in the future. It's kind of important how they're constructed. But now we're just going to look at kind of how they painted and what they valued. So in the early part of the period, they valued sort of these red colors. Like there's this red background. So it's not really to our sensibility now. And they changed over the years. We're going to change here in a minute. Switch, right? As we'll see, this will be a theme throughout the semester. What was liked at one point, goes out with the old after a while, several decades or maybe several hundred years in their case. Right? So we switch from the people to now we're talking about realism. Well, part of realism is just nature. What is out in nature? So they're emulating that here. And notice the colors have all shifted. The thematic subject is shifted. It's very peaceful to look at. After a while, this is going to come back much later, but the illusion of three-dimensional space and a wall manipulated with this line here, see? And then altogether starts changing a lot. So we're away from nature and with more sea colors here now. This is sort of the sea blues and the sea greens, all that. So not bad. Into finally, what are the young people up to, right? probably two important houses getting together, or something like this, with the woman and the man. And the fruit that is going to show up forever. The next chapter, The Birth of Religion, is not too heavy on art, but after this, and especially when we sort of really get going in midway through the course, always fruit, water, or wine here, the stills. We're going to talk about why those are important, why they seem to matter to people later. Seems to nothing else connotates a kind of basic craftsmanship in the form. And this is just a list of some of the early emperors. We're going to talk about this guy a lot next time. One of the more important people in Western civilization. Maybe, definitely top 5. I may go top 3. I'd have to think about it. I will over the next week. But a really, really important person here in Constantine. And I think this will cover us for today on the Screencast.